Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending. This is Understanding the Year 5 Interim Report. I will try to use that name consistently. It's been called many things over the years, Interim Report, 5-year Interim Report, but I'm trying to keep it consistent. So Year 5 Interim Report. But if you hear me say Interim Report, please forgive me. I'm meaning the same thing. To timestamp this, we are recording this on March 28th, 2024. As many of you know by now, we update documents up to twice a year, maybe even a little more often, depending on necessity. If you have any questions about the current requirements that you may see on this, if you're watching this down the road on demand, please check out the website or contact NAACLS staff. Two people joining me today, or us today, I should say. Jimmy March-Missler, who is a member of NAACLS Review Committee. Also, Michelle Gianosa, who many of you probably know as the accreditation coordinator for MLS programs, as well as assembling board and review committee agendas and the liaison to them. And my name is Mark Spence. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives. So we're here to talk about the interim report. This is a relatively new report for NAACLS. We've only been probably doing it about 5 years now. And through those 5 years, we've heard a lot of feedback on things that we can improve or maybe things that are confusing. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some clarity for that today. So it may be helpful to talk about when the 5-year interim report is required, and that is halfway through an accreditation cycle of a 10-year program. The 10-year program is the maximum award, so these are already very successful programs. They usually have a partial to no compliance on their previous award, and their current cycle they have no non-compliance. So Jimmy, you've been in a position to review some of these interim reports just from I guess, a macro 10,000 foot level. Do you want to talk about that process and what you've seen and maybe some things that would help program directors when they approach this?
Yeah, so this is the Year 5 report. So this is just supposed to be like a snapshot. This is just where you are. We know that you all have great programs and you've already completed your self-study with this and the site visit. So this is kind of just like a little bit of where you are right now, and just letting us know with some like some examples and a narrative, and then submitting that for us to review. So it's really not supposed to be, a huge thing.
So when you're approaching your interim report and looking at the kind of items you should be including, here are a list of resources. I'll let Jimmy reference a few of these and what he finds helpful to direct you to, but I want to at least direct you to the award language. When you get an award from NAACLS, we do not change those requirements. So whether we're talking about a progress report or, for this conversation, an interim report, those items should be those are pretty much set in stone. Also, the standard compliance guide can be helpful for something like this because we'll give you an idea in the most extreme circumstance what we're looking for, but both Jimmy and I will repeat this probably many times, and we'll need to because we want to make sure it's clear that this is not intended to be a mini self-study. So when you look at standard 2, you may become overwhelmed with all those items listed in standard 2. You don't need to add all of those. I think the term Jimmy used was probably the best to remember. This is just a snapshot. Jimmy, were there any other items on this list that you would like to point out?
I mean, I would definitely say the template, which is actually getting reviewed. I think we're still kind of reviewing one right now. But the template kind of like walks you through the smaller pieces of standard 2 that you need. So that can be very helpful to kind of limit your scope of what you're looking for. And then definitely your discipline leads and the NAACLS staff are always there for answering questions and kind of helping you guide through the process. So if you have anything you need or something isn't making sense, definitely reach out.
And before we go to the next slide, just to point out, similar to our self-study and site visit, we put the review forms for those materials on our website. So if you would like to look at what our review committee members are using to review your reports, we have that form online. I believe it is called the 5-year interim review form, but if you just go to the document section and type in review, all of those our review forms should come up. Kind of mentioned before that this is a snapshot rooted in standard 2. I've been around long enough that I remember when we rolled out the 2012 standards, we really put a focus on the outcomes, and the outcomes are important, but I think what we've learned is there's a lot of focus on standard 2 with the assessment and continual improvement. And we'll look at those items a little bit later, what that means. But Jimmy, did you have anything to add with how to approach this from the standpoint of looking at standard 2?
I think this would be a good thing to just kind of look at, again, just pick a couple of examples. So standard 2 is all about the continuous improvement and assessment. So if you pick 1 or 2 things that you've used to assess over the last couple of years, or something that maybe you've noticed a change in, use that as an example to help write the narrative for the report, because that's really what us on the review committee are looking for, is that you have just a handful of examples, and it's not every single thing that you've been looking at over the last 5 years.
I think one important thing to point out is we are only requiring narratives on this report. And when I mentioned on top of narratives, we're looking again, snapshots, just a brief examples. Odds are those narratives could be 150 to 200 words, maybe even less. Jimmy, do you have any tips about maybe things, and I know you've provided some already, but any other specifics about what you may be looking for in some of these examples, or hints about how to kind of keep this brief and get straight to the important items?
Yeah, so if if you're assessing, every year, and you've, maybe put something in, like you've added case studies, or you've added new assessments, or you've changed some objectives, or you've switched something within a class, that's continuous assessment. That's an example. So you could use that one piece that you use. So just pick, a couple things that you've been assessing. You're already assessing them, and we don't need all of them. You just need 1 or 2 things to just show that you're continuously monitoring those things, and then writing the narrative for that. I definitely want to reiterate, the narrative should be around 100 to 200 words or less. I've seen some before where we get pages and pages of narratives and then hundreds of documents. This is not a self-study. This is really just to kind of understand where you are, and that you're continuing to do the stuff that we've already seen you do really well.
Dates. So often for staff, and I think our DLPs will get a question about what dates to include for the interim report. So when we're looking for dates, we are generally looking for the time frame that you see on your annual survey of programs and your self-study, which is that July 1st to June 30th. That's the frame we're kind of looking for. A great way to always make sure you have these dates to keep those annual survey results. Our annual survey mechanism will automatically email you when you finish doing your survey. And also start with the most current year when you're filling out this report, and work out 5 years. Work back 5 years. Jimmy, did you have anything to add when it comes to any helpful tips of working through the dates and things of that nature?
No, I think you explained it pretty well. I definitely would say just to go back to your annual surveys and use that data, because that's going to be the most, the most accurate and the most current.
And change and assess. So, yeah, so Jimmy, I don't know if you can comment a little bit on what we're looking for with the feedback, and maybe potentially an example of what we're looking for a major change, and things that you wouldn't consider a major change and would just be normal operating process for a program.
Sure. So definitely want to make sure that we're getting some feedback from employers and graduates. So we want those, for graduates, we want those to be at least 3 months out. It's not the ones that you're like the exit interviews. It should be further out than that, so you can assess whether or not the content that they received, or they can understand whether or not the content they received in the program was helpful. They can kind of assess it better. And then employees, I know it's been getting difficult over the last few years to kind of get feedback from employers because of HR and a lot of different things that are going on. So for instance, like what we do is on my rotation evals that they fill out of our students, we ask if they, if the student would be hireable, if there's anything that they see that might be missing from their entry level skills. And so that's a way to kind of get an idea of whether these individuals would be employable or not. And using that and reflecting on that for the interim report. So major changes again would be, changing classes, changing large portions of the class, or large sections of the objectives, big assessment changes, those types of things. Those are examples of majors, and then small would be like changing a book, maybe just like adding some quizzes in. That's not, super, a really big change. I think the other thing to note too is that you're all monitoring this. So just because you're monitoring it doesn't mean you have to make changes either. So if things are working well and you're getting the feedback that shows things are working well, just make sure you're also documenting that changes have not occurred. And your advisory board meetings, we went over the data, no changes at this time, or we might look at this later. That's acceptable too, but it has to be documented somewhere that either changes happened and what was assessed afterwards, or that they didn't happen.
So we're going to shift to general Q&A. I do have one question in the Q&A, but if you have any questions for either about the interim report or general NAACLS stuff is open as well. We'll take all and any questions. You can either type it in the Q&A chat box, not the regular chat box. I know it's kind of confusing, but also you can raise your hand and we can do it over audio as well. But before I get to the Q&A, these are some more resources that Jimmy mentioned before, the DLPs, discipline lead people. We have one of our review committee members who's a volunteer that is kind of taking on an extra amount of work and is available to our program directors if they have questions about standard interpretation. Questions about fees and when reports are due, those are better questions for staff. And if you don't know who the question goes to, you can just start with staff and we can do our best to direct you where the easiest way to get your answer. Also, I'd like to use this as a reminder to thank all of the volunteers on the call right now. All the names you see here are on volunteers. I see we have many of our active volunteers on the call, probably participating as a program director. And this is a volunteer-driven organization, so NAACLS couldn't do what we do without the time and expertise given to us, so we do appreciate that. The one question we have right now, which is more of a staff question, so Jimmy, you're off the hook. What if you are a new PD and you do not have access to your previous year's annual reports? I would say contact staff. We do have access to go back to Alchemer and get some of the previous data. Please don't use that as a reason not to save your previous annual surveys, because it does take some time to get into Alchemer and dig through and get that information. But if you are left in a position where you don't have them, we can do what we can to try to get that data for you. Michelle, I think the next one's going to be for you. Are we prompted ahead of time when our 5-year report is due? If so, how much lead time will we have?
Well, sure. So normally NAACLS staff will send out a reminder about 6 months prior that will include the template that you can use for your year 5 interim report. Otherwise, you certainly can download it. As Mark mentioned, it is already available on our website, so you have access to it now. And then I would always keep a copy of your board award, because that'll tell you exactly when your next report or any report is due to NAACLS as well. And if you don't have a copy of your board award, it is available on our website for you to download, or once again, you can contact staff and we'll be happy to give it to you.
Is the interim report template on the website the one that I could start to use to prepare for my upcoming interim report due date? I would say yes. As Jimmy said, we do have a task force looking at that form. We continually have task forces and groups looking at forms to make sure we can make them more clear and easy to use from a program director perspective. But the seismic requirements aren't going to change. So those requirements are locked into your on your board award. So you can go ahead and start using that form. I would keep an eye out about when another form would be available. I think the earliest a new form would be available would be probably after the September board meeting of 2024. That's the earliest. I don't see anything happening in April. So I think that took care of that. What if your program dates don't match the July-June year? We get this question often about other items, and it's just to make sure our data is consistent when we look at data, specifically in the self-study, the annual survey for benchmarks, and the year 5 annual, the year 5 interim report, we kind of need to pick a time frame to make those numbers consistent so we can identify trends. We know because our programs are all very different in delivery methods and things of that nature. There's not going to be a clean set of dates that work perfectly for everybody. So we just had to, as an organization, the board had to make a decision where we could find consistent data so we could look at trends. How are the interim reports reviewed? Should we expect feedback for interim meetings/visits? Jimmy, do you want to take a stab at this?
Sure. So the interim reports go to the RCAP review committees, and we just, we review them with the information that was given. Again, we're just looking for that snapshot, and they're either we either think that they're, you've given the information so they've met the requirements of the interim report, or that they haven't. And there are occasional times we might need additional information, and if that's the case, then NAACLS staff will reach out. But if not, we usually say, it's accepted or it's not accepted, and then it goes to I think the overall meeting, and then it goes to the board for like a final review of the outcome. We don't make, the RCAP doesn't make any, doesn't give feedback. We don't make suggestions. That's all up to the board. But we can just say, you've met, according to us, you've met the information we need. And then when you get an acceptable interim report back, that's basically, I guess, the only feedback you would probably get.
Yeah, the only document we really provide feedback in is an action plan, because the action plan is about the only report that we look at of what you may be doing in the future. So it's hard to determine whether that is compliant or not. The interim report, as Jimmy put well, it's kind of a no news is good news kind of thing. If we have concerns, we'll reach out, but other than that, you will get an accepted acknowledgement once it's all the way through the process. Michelle, next one for you. To whom should we send the report, and to which email?
For the program type, I would recommend you sending it off to either Stephanie Troxel. She's our program services assistant. And if you don't have her email, you certainly can get it off of our website. Otherwise, you can send it to any program service coordinator too, and we'll send it off to the right person from that once we receive it.
I know it says thank you because that says the automatic time, but I'm not booting everybody off. We still have some time for Q&A. If your surveys are new, this may be for you, Jimmy. If your surveys are new and you have very few responses, can adding comments from clinical evals from clinical affiliates, which are usually the employers in the area, also be used as feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. Any information that you get from your employers, whether they're affiliates or not, that's definitely information that you can use as assessment pieces. I'm not sure what you mean by student feedback. That wouldn't be necessarily a graduate. And I also understand it's very difficult to get graduate feedback. we have anywhere from 10 to 15 students graduate every year, and I think I get maybe 2, if I'm lucky, 3 graduate responses back. But any feedback you get is feedback. So I would just make sure you use that. And if anyone puts any comments in, definitely use those as well.
Okay, I have another one for you, Jimmy. I don't quite understand this, but that's maybe just because I'm not an educator and haven't worked in a university system. Can content for outcomes be obtained / aligned from a program university assessment report?
Potentially, if you're, so if I'm understanding this question correctly, this is for outcomes and assessment that the overall college or university is performing, correct? And then you're obviously taking part of this, kind of like an AQUAD. I would think that as long as they're items that are getting assessed, and you're continuously assessing them with feedback, then I think that could probably be used. Again, this is just a snapshot. The outcomes data that we're looking for is specifically for those 5 years to make sure that you're meeting the benchmarks. Other than that, the examples you give us could be from anything that you're monitoring or that you're assessing continually.
This isn't directly related to the interim report, but that's fine. Do the outcomes for 23-24 class graduating this June need to be on our website by April 1st, 2024? If your class hasn't graduated yet, we're not going to ask you for essentially data you don't have yet. So I would say no, that data does not need to be on the website by April 1st, 2024. I know that check-in period is coming up soon.
I think that's, oh yeah. So I just put an asterisk on mine and it says pending final information or pending final results. And I think that's acceptable.
Yeah. How long does the process take from turning in the report to getting the final acceptance? Michelle, do you want to take that?
Sure. So normally if we have interim reports coming in, say next week, they'll go out to the review committees probably before the end of the month. The review committees, because they're busy and volunteers as well, they usually get around 2 months to review everything. Then they'll turn in the interim report review form. From that point, you would receive feedback. Either it's unsatisfactory or it's not. If there was additional documentation needed, we would ask you for it at that point. Then it would go back to the review committees for our July meeting. After our July meeting, staff would turn around and provide the programs with a recommendation, and then it would go to the board meeting in September. And then you would finally receive your board award afterwards. So the whole process takes around 6 months. But I gave you the step-by-step process, so you understand.
I think that may be it. Give a few more moments. Yeah, that looks like it. Well, that looks like it's it. Thank you everybody for attending. Jimmy, thank you for making the time and providing the answers and the help you had on the help you gave on the PowerPoint presentation. We don't have the next date for April's Dr. NAACLS yet, but I expect that to be pretty soon. Also, we have a board meeting in April, so I would start keeping an eye on the NAACLS news in May for some board actions and things of that nature. So that being said, everybody enjoy the rest of your day.